Hi everyone, welcome back to Life Under Deborah's Palm, where today we're going to take a look at seasons. Seasons and weather go together usually in dreams, but because of the length of the video, I'm going to split them in two. They're going to be two videos and two blogs where you can go get the downloads for the worksheets if you like them. I'll leave the link in the description below. But the way I want to look at this to help you hopefully figure out what's going on is to look at things from a biblical perspective and also things that happen literally in our culture or your climate during those seasons. Understand that biblically those times were very agricultural, and the climate of Israel may be very different than the climate you live in. Their coldest month is January, and in January their lows are in the 40s and their highs are in the 60s. That's not how it is where I live. So their harvest cycles are a little bit different, probably maybe than where you live. One of the scriptures that goes with this is, I'm not going to read the whole thing. It's Ecclesiastes 3. It's often titled A Time for Everything. And if you like old music, you'll already know that in the 60s, a guy named Pete Seeger wrote a song called Turn, Turn, Turn. The Byrds made it very popular a few years later. It's based on this chapter. And this is how seasons go in life. And literally. And I'm not going to read the whole thing. I'm just going to read a few lines. And it says, "There is a time for everything and a season for every activity under the heavens. A time to be born and a time to die. A time to plant and a time to uproot." And it goes on through a whole bunch of other things. And then it says in verse 10, "I've seen the burden God has laid on the human race. He has made everything beautiful in its time." Seasons. You know, we use that metaphorically in our society, right? It's that kind of a season. Genesis 8:2 says, "While the earth remains, seed time and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter, day and night shall not cease." I think, at least in our society, we tend to think of time as linear, seasons as linear. It goes like 2003, 2004. But what God does is goes 2003, 2004, 2005. It's an upward spiral. And that's actually how the Jewish people think. And we should be on an upward spiral, not a downward one. That's often I'm going to start with the spring, and I am going to give you some biblical, just real short, biblically, what goes on in the spring. 2 Samuel talks about it, and it says, "Spring is a time when kings go to war." It can be a season of war. Are you battling something? Are you battling your health? Are you battling bad behaviors? Are you battling smoking? Whatever it is, spring is a time to go to war. Also, spring brings the rains, spring and fall. I'm going to jump here with both of them. This is out of Deuteronomy 11:14. "He will give the rain for your land in its season. In the early rain and the later rain, that you may gather in your grain and your wine and your oil." It's all about harvest. And even within our lives, from the symbolic, metaphorical sort of stance, it's about harvest. It's about getting the good things in us out, getting the bad things cut down. You can dream about summer and winter and summer. It does not go necessarily with the literal physical season that we're in. Spring. In the Bible. And in the Bible, the big celebration in spring is Passover. It's around March, April. And Passover is the freeing of Israel from the bondage of the Egyptians. Spring, looking at that way, can be a time of new beginnings. Israel left, it was a new beginning. They got out from under slavery, it was a new beginning. If we look at it from our own agricultural standpoint, if you like to vegetable garden, or you like to put flowers in the spring, or you like bulbs and that kind of thing, spring is a time where you're planning or planting. Sometimes usually in the northern hemisphere, well, in the north of the northern hemisphere where I live, we start our seeds indoors so that they have a longer growing season. People are planting, people are sowing, or let me try that again. People are planting, people are harvesting. And biblically, the first harvest came in just a few days after the Passover celebration, and that was called the First Fruits Festival, and that was the first of the barley season. From there, they count 50 days. We call it Pentecost. The Jews call it Shavuot. It means weeks. Those 7 weeks in between those two times is called counting the omer, and omer was a unit of measure. What was going on? They harvested wheat all spring. That was their crop, because summer in Israel, like June, July, August, and I think September, they get 0 rain. They do not get rain. It's hot and dry. We are probably looking for the nice weather, looking for some sunshine, maybe getting landscape beds ready, or cleaning up yards and getting mowers ready, and all those things that we do. What are you doing during that season in your dream? Spring can be a time of new growth, new birth, just newness. That's kind of how we look at it. Kind of the dead gets shaken off and the winter gets shaken off, and new things come to life. Summers are generally hot and dry, even if it's relative to where you live. Same in Israel, but in Israel, that's when they harvest fruit. So when you read about the grapes being harvested, they actually do that in the summer there. I live in a climate where grapes and apples are a fall harvest. They get all that stuff, they start bringing that in, figs, pomegranates. Now, for the rest of us that don't live in that climate, school's gotten out at the very end of spring. Usually depends on where you live in the US. Spring's gotten out, vacations started, hopefully some fun. The days are long, they're warm, they might be hot, they might be dry, you might be in a drought. What is your dream saying about that season? Is it a drought? At the end of the summer, we go back to school or college, either depending on where you're at. Things begin to shift into the fall. Planting wise, we have summer squash, we have fall squash. You might still be doing those things. Now we move into autumn. And in autumn, the high holy days come into play. They generally start in September and end in either September or October. It begins with Rosh Hashanah, which is the new year. It can be something new. It goes from there into Yom Kippur, which is a time, it's the Day of Atonement. It's a time of repentance that the Jewish people still do. What is God saying to you in that season? If that's in your dream, do you need to repent? Are there things that you need to work out? The High Holy Days ends with a week-long feast called the Feast of Tabernacles. Also known as Sukkot or booths, B-O-O-T-H, booths. That's a complete celebration, and it's harvest time, and I believe that they eat a new fruit or something in one of those. Maybe it's Rosh Hashanah. It's like a celebration of the new harvest coming in. It's also the ending of harvest time, and it's also a time of preserving the harvest if you're making juice or they pressed olive oil. All that stuff happened during that time. It can also mean a time of change. The leaves change. It can mean a death to something, not necessarily literal, but it's, maybe you're dying to some things that you need to die to. All those things can be the symbol of fall or autumn. Winter. Winter's generally considered cold and barren and dead. But a lot of things go on in winter that it really isn't always seen. In my climate, at the end of the fall season, we plant bulbs for the spring. We also plant garlic for the summer harvest. Although it doesn't look like things are going on, I have a horticulture background, so I will tell you this: seeds need some type of cold, usually. Anything that will drop its seeds, whether it's maple trees or squash, or I had a random cantaloupe come up in my garden one year from some compost I had dumped in the fall. We had cantaloupes the next summer. If it doesn't get a cold season, it doesn't sprout. That is very true. I won't say of all, but of many of our produce items. Some, they're prolific, but they can overwinter, as can disease. But that, even though it seems barren, it doesn't mean that something isn't going on below the surface. It's also a time to kind of prep for spring. If you do gardening, you start planning after you have torn down and ripped out all your stuff in the fall. You might start flipping through seed catalogs and start looking for what is to come in the spring and making your plans. And as I said at the beginning, spring is the time when kings go to war. They need a strategy before they go to war. You may gain strategy in this time. Biblically, there is something called Purim, I think is how you pronounce it, or Purim. I hear most people say Purim, P-U-R-I-M. That is the story of Queen Esther. Sorry about that. That's the story of Queen Esther, where she overthrows an evil plot to kill all the Jewish race. That's what gets celebrated in that time. You may be on your way to a great overthrow of some garbage that does not belong in your life, or maybe a sickness or disease. You're getting ready to overthrow some things. It all depends. So as I think I mentioned this in the beginning, you can dream about any season during any season. It doesn't have to be summer and dream about summer. You could be dreaming about winter. So when you take a look at your dream, consider what you're doing. Are you cleaning up because it's fall, raking leaves? Are you planting? Are you pulling out patio furniture, putting patio furniture away? There are things that happen in every season, and some of that will be really, like as usual, subjective to the dreamer and where you live in your climate as to how the weather is and the things you do during those times. I hope this helps a little bit, and next time we will be looking at the actual weather and weather events like storms and tornadoes and things like that. So until next time, be blessed.